The scent of expensive whiskey burned my nostrils as it soaked through my white uniform shirt, turning the fabric translucent against my skin. Ice cubes clattered to the floor around my feet, melting into small puddles that reflected the dim Edison bulbs hanging from the exposed brick ceiling of Bellisimo's. Time slowed as laughter erupted from table 7, 4 men in tailored suits, their Rolex watches glinting as they raised their remaining drinks in mock toasts. I stood frozen, humiliation burning hotter than the alcohol seeping through my clothes. "Looks like you could use a drink, sweetheart," sneered the one who'd thrown his glass, some finance type with too much money and too little decency. His friends howled with laughter, drawing stares from the other patrons of the upscale Italian restaurant. I blinked back tears, feeling exposed, as the wet fabric clung to my body. 6 months at this job, 6 months of double shifts and sore feet, of memorizing wine pairings and enduring wandering hands from customers who thought a good tip entitled them to more than service. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the automatic apology escaping my lips before I could catch it. That's what they'd reduced me to, apologizing for their cruelty. As I bent to gather the shattered glass, the sharp edges threatening to slice my fingers. The restaurant had fallen quiet except for the low murmur of uncomfortable witnesses and the continuing snickers from table 7. Riley, Marcos, the floor manager, appeared beside me, his voice low. "Go clean yourself up. I'll handle this." I nodded mutely and backed away, clutching my serving tray against my chest like a shield. As I retreated toward the staff bathroom, I caught a movement at the corner of my eye. Someone watching from the shadowed booth in the back corner. I'd noticed him earlier, of course, the kind of man who commands attention without seeking it. Dark suit, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders, no tie, just the top button of a crisp white shirt undone, revealing a sliver of tanned skin. He sat alone, a single tumbler of amber liquid untouched before him, observing the room with casual intensity. What struck me most were his eyes. Dark and calculating beneath perfectly arched brows. They hadn't left me all evening, following as I moved between tables, making me fumble water pitchers and nearly drop a tray of appetizers. There was something predatory in that gaze, something that made my skin prickle with awareness. Now those eyes were fixed on table 7, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Something cold settled in my stomach at the sight. Not fear, exactly. Something deeper, more instinctive, like spotting a wolf in the forest and knowing you've already been seen. In the cramped staff bathroom, I dabbed at my shirt with paper towels, the material sticking to my skin in embarrassing transparency. My reflection stared back at me, pale face flushed with humiliation, blonde hair falling loose from its practical bun, blue eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "Pull it together, Riley," I whispered to myself. "You need this job." The truth hung heavy around my neck. Rent due in 3 days, a refrigerator holding nothing but condiments and a half-empty carton of milk, and the persistent calls from collection agencies about medical bills I couldn't pay. My father's cancer treatments had drained what little savings I'd managed to scrape together waiting tables since dropping out of college to care for him. Now he was gone, leaving me with nothing but debt and the hollow echo of an empty apartment. I twisted my hair back into a tight bun, splashed cold water on my face, and straightened my shoulders. 6 more hours on my shift. I could endure anything for 6 hours. When I emerged, Marcos met me with a clean shirt from the lost and found box. "Those guys at 7 settled their bill and left," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Big tip. Meaning management wouldn't be asking them not to return, regardless of how they'd treated staff." I nodded, unsurprised. Money talked at Bellisimo's, and people like me just served at dinner. I changed quickly and returned to the floor, my professional smile plastered back in place, though it felt brittle around the edges. The dining room had resumed its normal hum of conversation and clinking silverware. Table 7 was empty now, littered with crumpled napkins and half-eaten entrees. As I approached to clear it, I noticed something unusual. The dark-eyed man from the corner booth was gone too. The night dragged on, my humiliation fading into the background noise of aching feet and mental calculations about which bills I could postpone another week. By closing time, I was running on autopilot, rolling silverware into napkins for tomorrow's service while the other servers counted their tips. "Hey, Riley." Marcos appeared at my side, holding out an envelope. "Someone left this for you." I frowned, taking the plain white envelope. "A customer?" He shrugged. "The guy from booth 19. The corner one?" My pulse quickened as I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a stack of crisp $100 bills. More money than I made in 2 weeks. "What the hell?" I whispered, quickly tucking the money back into the envelope when I caught Sophia, another server, watching with undisguised curiosity. "There's a card," Marcos said, pointing to a small rectangle of heavy cream cardstock that had fallen onto the counter. In elegant black script, it read simply, "For the dry cleaning, AV." "Who is AV?" I asked, but Marcos just shrugged again. "Never seen him before tonight, but whoever he is, he ordered our most expensive whiskey and didn't touch it. Left a $1,000 tip too." I stared at the envelope in my hand, unease creeping along my spine. This was too much money for dry cleaning a cheap uniform shirt. Way too much. What did this stranger want from me? Outside, the October night had turned cold, a cutting wind sweeping between the tall buildings of downtown. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around me, wishing I'd had the foresight to bring a scarf. The restaurant was in the business district, largely deserted at this hour, except for the occasional late-night office worker hurrying toward the parking garages. I headed for the bus stop 3 blocks away, my footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. The weight of the envelope in my purse seemed to grow heavier with each step. Common sense told me to return it, that no one gave away money without expecting something in return. But another voice, the one that remembered my empty refrigerator and looming eviction notice, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the stroke of luck I desperately needed. The sound of an engine purring to life made me jump. A black Bentley with tinted windows had pulled away from the curb half a block ahead. I hadn't even noticed it parked there, which seemed impossible, given how out of place such luxury looked in this neighborhood after dark. As it glided past, I caught a glimpse of the driver, solid build, close-cropped hair, the unmistakable bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. My breath caught in my throat as the rear window lowered slightly, just enough to reveal the profile of the man from booth 19. Our eyes met for a brief moment, before the window raised again, and the car accelerated smoothly away, leaving me standing alone beneath the harsh glow of a streetlight. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter while I paced my tiny apartment, arguing with myself about what to do with it. By morning, necessity had won over caution. I paid my rent and bought groceries, promising myself I'd find a way to return the rest. The following evening, I arrived at Bellissimo's to find Marcos waiting for me, his expression unusually grave. "Riley, there's someone here to see you," he said, his voice low as he nodded toward the manager's office. "Me? Who? I don't know, but he asked for you specifically." He hesitated. "He's with Mr. DeLuca." Anthony DeLuca, the owner of Bellissimo's, rarely set foot in the restaurant, preferring to leave day-to-day operations to his managers. In the 6 months I'd worked there, I'd seen him exactly twice. Dread pooled in my stomach as I followed Marcos to the office. Had someone reported me for accepting that money? Was I about to be fired? When Marcos opened the door, I froze in the threshold. Anthony DeLuca stood behind his desk, his normally confident demeanor subdued, but it was the other figure in the room that captured my attention, the man from booth 19, now standing at the window overlooking the restaurant floor. He turned as I entered, and in the bright overhead light, I could finally see him clearly. Younger than I'd initially thought, maybe early 30s, with olive-toned skin and features that belonged on an Italian Renaissance painting. Strong jaw, straight nose, full lips currently pressed into a serious line. His dark hair was styled impeccably, not a strand out of place, but it was still those eyes that dominated his presence, deep brown, almost black, fringed with thick lashes that should have softened them, but somehow only emphasized their intensity. "Miss Walker?" he said, my name rolling off his tongue with the barest hint of an accent. "Thank you for joining us." I swallowed hard, suddenly acutely aware of my wrinkled uniform and the scuffed shoes I hadn't had time to polish. "Mr. DeLuca," I managed, nodding to my boss before turning uncertainly to the stranger. "Sir, Alessandro Vitale," he introduced himself, making no move to shake my hand. Instead, he studied me with that same unsettling focus I'd noticed the night before. "I believe you received my message, the envelope. A.V. Alessandro Vitale." "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, but it was too generous." "I want to return. What happened last night," he interrupted smoothly, "was unacceptable." I blinked, confused by the shift in conversation. "Sir?" "The incident with those men." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. DeLuca assures me they will not be welcome back to this establishment." I glanced at my boss, who nodded quickly, a bead of sweat visible on his temple despite the cool temperature of the office. "It's really not necessary," I began. "These things happen in the service industry." "No." The single word cut through the air like a blade. "They do not happen. Not to you. Not anymore." Confusion washed over me as I glanced between Alessandro Vitale and my suddenly deferential boss. What was happening? Why would this wealthy stranger concern himself with an incident involving a waitress he'd never met? "I don't understand," I said, finding my voice. "Mr. Vitale, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. Really." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps, or surprise at being questioned. "You misunderstand, Miss Walker. I'm not asking if you're fine with it. I'm informing you of what will be done." His tone left no room for argument, yet something about his presumption sparked a flare of defiance in me. I'd spent my life being pushed around. By circumstances, by customers, by debt collectors. I straightened my shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "With all due respect, sir, it's not your place to make that decision." The room fell deathly silent. Mr. DeLuca's eyes widened in alarm, and he took a half-step forward as if to physically place himself between me and Alessandro. But Alessandro's expression didn't darken with anger as I'd expected. Instead, his lips curved into a small, appreciative smile that transformed his severe features, revealing a dimple in his left cheek that seemed utterly at odds with his intimidating presence. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to me. Then, louder, "Anthony, give us a moment. It wasn't a request." Mr. DeLuca nodded quickly and exited, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt like the ceiling of a tomb. I suppressed a shiver, suddenly aware of how alone I was with this man who could apparently make my boss jump with just a look. Alessandro moved to the desk, gesturing for me to sit in one of the chairs across from him. When I remained standing, that almost smile appeared again. "Please," he said, the words softening his command into something that sounded like politeness. I sat, perching on the edge of the chair, my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. "You're not from here," he observed, taking the seat across from me. Not a question, but a statement. "Wisconsin originally," I answered, unsure why I was sharing even this small detail. "Small town you've never heard of. And what brought you to Chicago, Riley Walker?" The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "My father got sick," I said simply, not wanting to dredge up the painful details for a stranger. "I came to be with him, for treatment at Northwestern Memorial." Understanding flickered in those dark eyes. "And now?" "Now he's gone," I said, the words still raw even after 6 months. "And I'm still here." Alessandro nodded once, as if I'd confirmed something for him. "You work 2 jobs, this one, and morning shifts at the cafe on Michigan Avenue." My blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" Instead of answering, he reached inside his suit jacket and withdrew a slim leather wallet. From it, he produced a business card and slid it across the desk to me. Black cardstock with silver lettering embossed with a simple AV and a phone number, nothing else. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Walker." Warning bells clanged in my head. I'd heard about propositions from wealthy men before. Sophia had gotten one just last month. A sugar daddy offering to pay her rent in exchange for companionship. "I'm not that kind of girl," I said firmly, pushing the card back toward him. For the first time, genuine surprise registered on his face. followed by something that might have been offense. "I'm not that kind of man," he replied, his accent more pronounced in his indignation. Heat flooded my cheeks. "I'm sorry, I just assumed I'm offering you a job, Miss Walker. A legitimate one." I blinked. "A job? Doing what?" "My personal assistant recently left for maternity leave. I need someone to replace her temporarily. 6 months, possibly longer, but I don't have any qualifications. I'm a waitress. You're observant, efficient. You handle difficult situations with grace." His eyes held mine. "And you need the money." The last statement hit like a slap, reminding me of my precarious financial situation. Still, suspicion nagged at me. "Why me? There are thousands of qualified candidates in Chicago." "Because I've decided it should be you." The simplicity of his answer was somehow more unsettling than any elaborate explanation would have been. He didn't feel the need to justify his decisions to anyone, least of all a waitress from Wisconsin. "The salary is $15,000 a month, plus benefits. A car and driver at your disposal, an apartment in my building, should you wish it." I nearly choked. 15,000? A month? His expression didn't change. "Is that insufficient?" A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. "That was more than I made in half a year." "No, it's fine." "Good." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with a casual elegance that spoke of a lifetime of privilege. "You begin tomorrow. My driver will collect you at 7 a.m. "Wait," I protested, rising quickly. "I haven't accepted yet." Alessandro paused, studying me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through my skin to the desperation beneath. "Haven't you?" The question hung in the air between us, honest in a way that stripped away pretense. We both knew I couldn't afford to refuse. My father's medical bills alone. What would I have to do? I asked finally. "Manage my schedule. Coordinate with my security team. Handle correspondence." He listed the duties as if they were perfectly ordinary tasks that justified an extraordinary salary. "Nothing beyond your capabilities." Something about this didn't add up. Men like Alessandro Vitale didn't pluck random waitresses from obscurity for high-paying positions. There was more to this story, more that he wasn't telling me. "Who are you, really?" I asked softly. A ghost of that dimpled smile appeared again. "Someone who repays debts, Miss Walker." "You'll come to understand that about me." "What debt?" "We've never met before last night." Alessandro stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle, with notes of cedar and bergamot. "Your father," he said quietly. "Thomas Walker. He was a good man." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "You knew my dad?" "We had business together many years ago. He did me a service I never properly repaid." His eyes softened fractionally. When I recognized his daughter, I knew I had my chance to make it right. "You recognized me?" I whispered, disbelief flooding through me. "How?" "You have his eyes." Alessandro's gaze lingered on my face. The same shade of blue, determined, honest. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. My father had never mentioned knowing anyone like Alessandro Vitale. What kind of business could a high school science teacher from Wisconsin possibly have had with this clearly powerful man? "Think about my offer," Alessandro said, stepping back. "Though I suspect I already know your answer." As if on cue, the door opened, and Mr. DeLuca reappeared, his expression carefully neutral. "Alessandro," he said, with the deference one might show royalty, "your car is waiting." Alessandro nodded once, then turned those intense eyes back to me. "Until tomorrow, Miss Walker." It wasn't a question. After he left, the office felt emptier somehow, as if he'd taken all the oxygen with him. Mr. DeLuca watched me with an unreadable expression. "Riley," he began, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Do you know who that was?" I shook my head. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Alessandro Vitale is not someone you say no to. Whatever he's offering you, I suggest you take it." "You sound afraid of him," I observed. "Not afraid," he corrected carefully. "Respectful. His family has influence in this city, the kind that doesn't make the newspapers. A chill ran down my spine as understanding dawned. The expensive suit, the driver with the shoulder holster, the way my boss had practically kowtowed to him. "He's connected," I said, the euphemism hanging between us. "Mafia?" Mr. DeLuca winced at the blunt word. "Old Italian families prefer business interests. But yes, the Vitales have been a force in Chicago since Prohibition. Alessandro is, well, let's just say he's important." My head spun with this new information. I'd been offered a job by a man who was apparently some kind of mafia figure. A man who claimed to have known my straight-laced, law-abiding father. None of it made sense. "Take the night off," Mr. DeLuca said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "You have a lot to consider." I nodded numbly and gathered my things from the staff room, ignoring the curious glances from my co-workers. Outside, the night air had turned biting, a precursor to the brutal Chicago winter to come. As I walked to the bus stop, my mind raced. I should refuse the offer, walk away, call the police even, though I wasn't sure what crime I would report. Being offered a suspiciously high-paying job hardly seemed like something the Chicago PD would care about. But the thought of going back to endless double shifts, of dodging bill collectors and eating ramen for dinner every night, and there was my father's memory to consider. If Alessandro Vitale had truly known him, perhaps this was a chance to learn something new about the man I thought I'd known completely. A sleek black car pulled up beside me, the passenger window sliding down silently. The driver, the same broad-shouldered man I'd glimpsed last night, regarded me impassively. "Miss Walker," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so intimidating. "Mr. Vitale thought you might appreciate a ride home." I hesitated, eyeing the luxury vehicle warily. "I'm fine with the bus. It's going to rain," the driver observed, nodding toward the dark clouds gathering overhead. "And the next 156 isn't due for 30 minutes. How did he know which bus I took? Before I could respond, fat raindrops began to splatter on the sidewalk around me. Within seconds, they'd intensified to a downpour that soaked through my thin jacket. With a resigned sigh, I opened the car door and slid into the plush leather back seat, immediately enveloped in warmth and the lingering scent of Alessandro's cologne. "Thank you," I said to the driver as he pulled smoothly away from the curb. "Marco," he supplied, meeting my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. "And it's my pleasure, Miss Walker." "Just Riley is fine." Marco nodded, a small smile touching his otherwise stoic features. "Mr. Vitale speaks highly of you." I blinked in surprise. He barely knows me. He's a good judge of character. The car glided through the rainy streets, the expensive suspension absorbing every bump and pothole. Through the tinted windows, I watched the city transform from the gleaming business district to my considerably less glamorous neighborhood. "May I ask you something, Marco?" He inclined his head slightly, keeping his eyes on the road. "What kind of man is Alessandro Vitale, really?" Marco considered this for a long moment. "Loyal," he said finally, "to those who earn it. Fair, in his own way. Not someone who forgets either a kindness or a slight." He glanced at me again in the mirror. "And not someone who makes offers lightly." The car pulled up in front of my apartment building, a rundown brownstone that had seen better days several decades ago. Marco was out and opening my door before I could reach for the handle, holding an umbrella over me as he escorted me to the entrance. "Mr. Vitale will send a car at 7 a.m., he said, seemingly untroubled by the rain soaking his shoulders. "Should I tell him you'll be ready?" I stared at this man who so clearly believed I'd already made my decision. Perhaps I had. "Yes," I said finally. "I'll be ready." Marco nodded once, something like approval flashing in his eyes. "Good night, Miss Walker. Sleep well." Back in my cramped apartment, I sank onto my second-hand couch, Alessandro's business card clutched in my fingers. The sleek black cardstock seemed to absorb the dim light from my single lamp. I'd just agreed to work for a man who was, by all indications, involved in organized crime, a man who knew my father somehow. A man who looked at me with an intensity that made my skin burn. What had I gotten myself into? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I look forward to our partnership, Miss Walker. AV." I stared at the screen, wondering how he'd gotten my number, then laughed at myself. Of course, Alessandro Vitale could get a waitress's phone number. He probably had my entire life history at his fingertips. Instead of frightening me, the thought brought an odd sort of relief. After months of being invisible, of struggling alone, someone saw me, even if that someone was a dangerous man with unclear intentions. I texted back a simple, "Until tomorrow." As I prepared for bed, my father's voice echoed in my memory. "Be careful the debts you incur, Riley girl. The most dangerous ones are those you don't know you're taking on." I wondered, as sleep finally claimed me, what debt I might be incurring now, and what Alessandro Vitale would ultimately expect in payment. The car arrived at precisely 7 a.m., not a minute earlier or later. Marco stood on my doorstep, immaculate in his black suit despite the early hour, holding an umbrella against the persistent drizzle. "Good morning, Miss Walker," he greeted me, his expression professionally neutral as he took in my appearance. I'd agonized over what to wear, settling finally on the one business-appropriate outfit I owned, a navy pencil skirt and cream blouse I'd worn to my father's funeral, paired with sensible black heels. My blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and I'd applied minimal makeup, aiming for professional rather than glamorous. "Is this appropriate?" I asked hesitantly as Marco opened the car door for me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Mr. Vitale appreciates punctuality and preparedness. You've demonstrated both." Not quite an answer, but I slid into the back seat anyway, clutching my worn leather purse like a lifeline. We drove north, away from my neighborhood, and toward the gleaming high-rises of the Gold Coast. The rain-slicked streets reflected the early morning light, the city transforming from gritty to glamorous with each passing block. "May I ask where we're going?" I ventured after several minutes of silence. "Vitale Tower," Marco replied. "Mr. Vitale maintains offices on the top floor and a residence on the penthouse level." I'd seen the building from afar, an elegant spire of glass and steel overlooking Lake Michigan. Its top floor is often shrouded in clouds on stormy days, the kind of place where condos started in the millions, and the lobby probably had fresh flowers every day. "And that's where I'll be working? In his office?" "Primarily," Marco confirmed, turning onto Michigan Avenue. "Though your position may require travel at times." Travel. I'd never been farther from home than Chicago, had never even owned a passport. The prospect was simultaneously terrifying and thrilling. We pulled into an underground parking garage beneath the tower, bypassing the public entrance for a private elevator that required Marco's fingerprint and a key card to access. As the doors closed silently behind us, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Pale face, wide eyes, the picture of uncertainty. "Mr. Vitale can be intense," Marco said suddenly, his eyes meeting mine in our reflections. "But he is fair. Remember that." Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that looked like something from an architectural magazine. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. A stunning woman with coffee-colored skin and a sleek bob sat behind a curved desk, typing rapidly on a slim keyboard. "Good morning, Marco," she greeted, her British accent crisp and professional. "This must be Miss Walker." "Riley," I corrected automatically, extending my hand. "Nice to meet you." "Zara Khoury," she supplied, her handshake firm. "Head of Security Operations for Mr. Vitale. I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Head of Security?" She looked more like a fashion executive, her tailored suit and statement earrings exuding understated wealth. "Mr. Vitale is waiting in his office," Zara continued, rising from her desk. "I'll take you to him." We walked down a hallway lined with what appeared to be original artwork, pieces I vaguely recognized from my single art history class in college. Picassos and Monets displayed without pretense, as casually as most people might hang family photos. At the end of the hall, Zara stopped before a set of double doors and knocked once before pushing them open. "Riley Walker, sir," she announced, then stepped back to allow me to enter. Alessandro's office was a testament to power disguised as minimalism. Vast windows showcased a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, steel gray today under the cloudy sky. A massive desk of dark wood dominated one end, while a seating area with low leather couches occupied the other. The walls held only 3 items: a large abstract painting in shades of crimson and gold, a vintage map of Chicago, and an antique sword mounted in a glass case. Alessandro himself stood by the windows, his back to me, a phone pressed to his ear. He wore another impeccably tailored suit, this one charcoal gray, his posture radiating controlled energy even in stillness. "È fatto. Non mi interessa quanto costa," he said into the phone, his Italian flowing melodically. "Occupatine." He ended the call and turned, those intense eyes finding mine immediately. "Miss Walker," he said, tucking the phone into his pocket as he crossed the room toward me. "Right on time." "I'm punctual to a fault," I replied, fighting the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. That hint of a smile touched his lips again. A valuable quality. He gestured to the seating area. "Please, sit. Would you like coffee? Tea? Coffee, please. Black." He nodded approvingly and pressed a button on his desk. Within moments, a young man appeared with a tray bearing a carafe and 2 porcelain cups so delicate they looked like they might shatter in my clumsy hands. As the coffee was poured, Alessandro settled into the chair across from me, his movements fluid and precise. "I trust Marco saw to your comfort this morning?" "Yes, thank you for sending the car." "It's yours now," he said casually, lifting his cup to his lips. "Marco will be your primary driver, though others are available as needed." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Mine? I can't accept—" "It's a company car," he interrupted smoothly. "Standard for employees at your level. Nothing more, my level. As if I'd earned this position through merit, rather than being plucked randomly from a restaurant floor." "About that," I said, setting my cup down carefully. "I still don't understand what exactly you expect me to do. I have no experience as a personal assistant." "Your responsibilities will be straightforward initially," Alessandro replied. "Managing my calendar, coordinating with my team, handling personal matters that require discretion." He studied me over the rim of his cup. "You're an intelligent woman, Miss Walker. You'll learn quickly." The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught me off guard. "Thank you," I murmured, "but I still don't understand why me." "What you said about my father will be explained in due time," he finished, his tone making it clear the subject was closed for now. "Today, Zara will acquaint you with our security protocols and systems. Tomorrow, we begin in earnest." I wanted to press him, to demand answers about my father, but something in his expression warned against it. Instead, I nodded, taking another sip of what was possibly the best coffee I'd ever tasted. "There is one more matter," Alessandro said, reaching into his jacket to withdraw an envelope. "Your advance." He slid it across the coffee table toward me. I opened it hesitantly to find a check for $30,000, 2 months' salary. "I haven't earned this yet," I protested. "Consider it a signing bonus to settle any outstanding matters. My father's medical bills. Of course he would know about those. I've taken the liberty of having your things moved to an apartment in this building," he continued, as if he hadn't just handed me a small fortune. "The 27th floor. It seemed prudent, given your new position, to have you close at hand." Anger flared suddenly in my chest. "You had no right to make that decision for me." For the first time, I saw surprise register on his face, quickly masked. "You prefer your current accommodations?" "That's not the point," I said, heat rising to my cheeks. "You can't just rearrange my life without asking. I'm your employee, not your possession." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Not anger, exactly, but a coldness that made my skin prickle with warning. "In my experience, Miss Walker, people generally appreciate having their problems solved." "Not when it makes them feel powerless," I countered, meeting his gaze despite the rapid beating of my heart. "Not when it comes with strings attached that haven't been made clear." Alessandro leaned forward slightly, the movement subtle, but somehow threatening in its intensity. "Let me be clear then. I'm offering you a chance to start fresh, to leave behind the debt and struggle, to honor your father's memory by accepting help he would have wanted you to have." His voice dropped lower. "The only string, as you put it, is your loyalty while in my employ." A heavy silence fell between us, weighted with unspoken implications. I sensed I was at a crossroads, that whatever I decided in this moment would irrevocably alter the course of my life. "My father was an honest man," I said finally. my voice barely above a whisper. Whatever he did for you, it wasn't illegal. He wouldn't have crossed that line. Alessandro's expression softened fractionally. Your father saved my life, Miss Walker. At considerable risk to his own. That's a debt that can't be repaid with mere money. My breath caught. What? How? Before he could answer, a sharp knock interrupted us. Zara appeared in the doorway, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but the Rossi situation requires your immediate attention. Alessandro's face hardened instantly, all traces of our personal conversation vanishing behind a mask of cool authority. Of course. He rose smoothly to his feet. Miss Curry will show you to your office and begin your orientation. We'll continue our discussion later. Just like that, I was dismissed, left with more questions than answers, and a check that could change my life if I was willing to accept it. Zara led me to a smaller but still elegant office adjacent to Alessandro's. This will be your workspace, she explained, gesturing to the sleek desk equipped with the latest technology. The door to your right connects directly to Mr. Vitale's office for convenience. And privacy, I observed, noting the lack of windows in the connecting wall. Zara's lips curved in a knowing smile. Mr. Vitale values discretion above all. She settled into a chair across from my desk. Now, let's discuss security protocols. Your position places you in Mr. Vitale's inner circle, which comes with certain risks. Risks? I echoed, though I could guess her meaning. Mr. Vitale has business rivals, she said diplomatically. People who might see those close to him as leverage. Your safety is now a priority for our security team. The implication was clear. By accepting this position, I was stepping into a dangerous world. One where waitresses could become targets simply by association. That's why he wanted me to move into the building, I realized. For security. Zara nodded. The 27th floor is reserved for key personnel. My apartment is across the hall from yours. Marco is 2 doors down. A gilded cage, then. Protection that doubled as surveillance. The rest of the day passed in a blur of information. Security codes, emergency protocols, communication systems, and an introduction to the sleek tablet that would serve as my primary work tool. By afternoon, my head was spinning with new names and procedures. That's enough for today, Zara said finally, checking her watch. Marco will show you to your apartment tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp. Marco appeared as if summoned, his expression unreadable as he escorted me back to the elevator. We rode in silence to the 27th floor, where he led me to a door marked 2703. Your keycard will access only this floor, the garage level, and the office suite, he explained, handing me a slim card embossed with the Vitale logo. For security reasons, of course, I murmured, too overwhelmed to argue. When Marco opened the door to my apartment, I froze in disbelief. The space before me was larger than my entire previous apartment building. An open-concept layout with soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that looked straight out of a design magazine. This can't be right, I whispered. Mr. Vitale insisted you have one of the corner units, Marco said, as if that explained everything. Your personal belongings have been unpacked in the bedroom. If you need anything, simply press 9 on the house phone. After he left, I wandered through the space in a daze, trailing my fingers over surfaces too expensive to name. In the bedroom, I found my meager possessions, the few photos of my father, my small collection of well-worn books, my clothes hanging in a closet larger than my old kitchen. The contrast was jarring, my shabby life transplanted into this luxury like a weed among orchids. On the bedside table lay a small box, with a note in now familiar handwriting, for emergencies, AV. Inside was a sleek smartphone, already activated and programmed with a handful of contacts. Alessandro, Zara, Marco, and something simply labeled security. As I sat on the edge of the absurdly comfortable bed, the events of the past 24 hours crashed over me like a wave. I'd gone from struggling waitress to the personal assistant of a man who was, by all indications, deeply embedded in Chicago's criminal underworld. A man who claimed to owe my father a life debt. A man whose dark eyes followed me with an intensity that bordered on possessive. My phone, my old phone, buzzed with a text from Sophie. Where are you? DeLuca says you quit? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could I explain what had happened when I barely understood it myself? Before I could decide, the new phone chimed with its own message. I hope the apartment meets your needs. Dinner, my penthouse, 8 p.m. We have much to discuss. AV. Not a request, not even a question. I glanced at the clock. 6:30 p.m. 90 minutes to prepare for dinner with Alessandro Vitale, a dinner where, presumably, he would finally explain his connection to my father and what exactly he expected from me in return for his generosity. I showered quickly in the luxurious bathroom, trying not to become distracted by the multiple shower heads and imported toiletries. After wrapping myself in the softest towel I'd ever touched, I faced the closet dilemma. Nothing I owned seemed appropriate for dining with a man like Alessandro. As if anticipating this problem, a section of the closet held clothes I'd never seen before. Designer pieces with tags still attached, in exactly my size. The presumption should have angered me, but exhaustion had dulled my indignation to a distant throb. I selected a simple black dress that seemed the least ostentatious of the options, paired with low heels I could actually walk in. After drying my hair and applying minimal makeup, I studied my reflection critically. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, someone polished and put together, someone who might belong in Alessandro Vitale's world, but the fear in her blue eyes gave her away. At precisely 7:55, a soft knock announced Marco's arrival to escort me to the penthouse. As the private elevator ascended to the top floor, I took deep breaths to calm my racing heart. "Mr. Vitale values honesty," Marco said suddenly, breaking our usual silence, even when it's uncomfortable. Before I could ask what he meant, the doors opened onto an entry foyer more suitable to a mansion than an apartment. Alessandro stood waiting, having exchanged his business suit for dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, open at the collar. The casual elegance of his attire somehow made him more intimidating, not less. "Miss Walker," he greeted, those dark eyes taking in my appearance with evident appreciation. "Welcome. Please, come in." As I stepped into Alessandro Vitale's private domain, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. Alessandro's penthouse was a study in understated wealth, soaring ceilings, museum-quality art, and panoramic views of Chicago's skyline now glittering against the night sky. Yet for all its grandeur, there was an unexpected warmth to the space. Comfortable furniture, books that showed signs of actually being read, a record player softly playing what sounded like vintage Italian opera. "You seem surprised," Alessandro observed, watching me take in my surroundings. I expected something more. I trailed off, unsure how to finish without sounding judgmental. "Ostentatious," he supplied, that hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Cold, perhaps?" I nodded, oddly grateful for his perception. "My business requires a certain public image," he said, leading me toward a spacious terrace enclosed in glass. "But in my private spaces, I prefer comfort." A table had been set for two, candles flickering in the gentle breeze from hidden vents. Beyond the glass walls, the lights of Chicago stretched to the horizon. The city spread beneath us like a tapestry of stars. "It's beautiful," I murmured, drawn to the view. "The most beautiful city in America," Alessandro agreed, his voice softening with genuine affection. "Though I might be biased. You were born here?" "Third generation. My grandfather came from Sicily in 1924. He pulled out a chair for me. "Please sit." I took the liberty of ordering dinner. As if on cue, a man in chef's whites appeared with the first course, delicate plates of something that looked too artistic to eat. "I hope you don't mind," Alessandro continued, taking his seat across from me. "Paolo is my personal chef. He's prepared some family recipes tonight." The chef placed the dishes before us with a flourish. "Capesante con purè di cavolfiore e tartufo nero," he announced, his Italian accent thick but melodious. "Scallops with cauliflower puree and black truffle," Alessandro translated, a favorite of mine. I took a small bite and barely suppressed a moan of pleasure. The scallop melted on my tongue, the flavors complex and harmonious in a way I'd never experienced in the chain restaurants that were the extent of my culinary education. "It's incredible," I admitted, taking another bite. Alessandro watched me with evident satisfaction before sampling his own plate. We ate in surprisingly comfortable silence for a few minutes, the excellence of the food requiring no commentary. As Paolo cleared our plates and poured wine into crystal glasses, I gathered my courage to address the questions that had been burning in my mind all day. "You said my father saved your life," I began, meeting Alessandro's dark gaze across the candlelight. "I'd like to know how." Something like respect flickered in his eyes, perhaps approval of my directness. He took a measured sip of his wine, considering his response. "It was 15 years ago," he said finally. "I was 22, just finishing college. My father sent me to Wisconsin on business. Legitimate business," he added, seeing my expression. "Timber mills. The Vitale family has diverse interests. Not all of them." He paused. "Controversial." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I was driving back to Chicago late one night. January, terrible weather. My car hit a patch of black ice on a deserted stretch of highway and went off the road." His expression darkened at the memory. "The car rolled several times down an embankment. I was trapped, bleeding, with no cell service. A chill ran through me as I began to see where this story was heading." "And my father found you," Alessandro nodded. "Thomas Walker was driving home from a late night at school. Grading papers," he said. "He spotted the wreckage, climbed down that embankment in a blizzard, and pulled me from the car moments before it caught fire." My throat tightened with emotion. It sounded exactly like something my father would do, risking his life for a stranger without hesitation. "He took me to his home," Alessandro continued. "Your home, I suppose. The nearest hospital was 50 miles away and the roads were impassable. He cleaned my wounds, set my broken arm, watched over me through the night to ensure I didn't slip into shock." I could picture it vividly, our small house with its perpetually drafty windows, my father's careful hands tending to this injured young man, his teacher's patience as he monitored vital signs. "You were 17 then," Alessandro said, his eyes studying my face as if searching for traces of the teenager I'd been. "Away at a debate tournament," your father said. "He showed me your trophies with such pride." Tears pricked at my eyes. Dad had always been my biggest champion. "Why didn't he ever mention you?" I asked. "In all these years, he didn't know who I was," Alessandro replied simply. "I gave him a false name. When my father's men came to collect me the next day, I'm certain Thomas understood something wasn't as it seemed, but he never asked questions. He simply helped a stranger in need, expecting nothing in return." His voice grew softer, a rare quality in this world. The chef returned with our main course, ossobuco with saffron risotto, but I barely noticed the presentation, absorbed in Alessandro's story. "So you tracked him down later?" I asked once Paolo had retreated again. "I tried," Alessandro admitted, "but discreetly from a distance. Your father had a clean life, a good life. I didn't want to complicate it with my presence. The implication hung between us." By then, Alessandro would have been deeper in his family's business, the kind of connection that could taint my father's reputation as an upstanding teacher. "So instead you watched from afar," I said softly, understanding dawning. "And when he got sick," Alessandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I couldn't interfere directly. He was proud, your father. He would have refused help from a stranger, especially one like me." A shadow crossed his features, but I made sure the best specialists were always available to him, that certain medical bills disappeared. My mind raced back to the mysterious insurance adjustments that had reduced some of Dad's astronomical hospital bills, adjustments the hospital administrators had never been able to explain satisfactorily. "That was you," I whispered. He inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. "It was little enough, compared to what I owed him. And now you're... what? Transferring that debt to me?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "Is that what this job is about? Paying off a debt to a dead man?" Alessandro's expression hardened, and I immediately regretted my harsh tone. But instead of anger, his response held a surprising vulnerability. "When I saw you in that restaurant," he said quietly, "being humiliated by those men not fit to breathe the same air as Thomas Walker's daughter, something shifted in me." He chose his words carefully, as if navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. "I recognized an opportunity to honor a debt, yes, but there's more to it than that." His eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. You showed the same courage as your father that night, the same dignity in the face of cruelty. It affected me. The admission seemed to cost him something. A crack in the armor of control he wore so effortlessly. I found myself wanting to reach across the table, to touch his hand in reassurance, but restrained myself. "So, this job is real?" I asked instead. "Not just charity or obligation?" "The position is genuine," he confirmed, seemingly grateful for the shift to more practical matters. "My previous assistant, Claudia, is indeed on maternity leave. The salary is standard for her position. Your duties will be exactly as I described." Relief washed through me, though uncertainty still lingered. "And after the 6 months, when she returns?" Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "We'll reassess then. Perhaps you'll find you have a talent for this work. Or perhaps you'll have saved enough to pursue other opportunities. Finish your degree, perhaps." The thought was tempting. Returning to the education I'd abandoned to care for my father, building a future on my own terms. But something about Alessandro's expression suggested he wasn't being entirely forthcoming. "And what about your other business interests?" I asked carefully. "Will I be involved in those too?" Alessandro's face closed like a shutter. "My personal assistant manages my legitimate affairs only, Miss Walker. You needn't concern yourself with other matters." The distance created by his sudden formality was palpable, a warning, perhaps, about boundaries I shouldn't cross. Paolo appeared again to clear our plates and serve dessert, a delicate panna cotta with fresh berries. As he worked, I noticed how he kept his eyes averted from Alessandro, his movements efficient but anxious. Everyone around Alessandro seemed to exist in a state of respectful fear. Everyone except me, it seemed. Once we were alone again, Alessandro's manner softened. "I've made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. I'm still trying to understand where I fit in all this," I admitted. "One day I'm serving drinks, the next I'm dining in a penthouse with a man who's essentially a stranger, yet somehow connected to my past. It's disorienting." "Understandable." He reached for the wine bottle, refilling my glass with practiced ease. "Perhaps we should start with simpler things then. Tell me about yourself, Riley Walker." The use of my first name, spoken in that slight accent, sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you wish to share," he replied, his posture relaxing slightly. "Your dreams, your regrets, the person you were before life intervened." The invitation to speak about myself, not as an employee or a charity case, but as a person worthy of interest, was surprisingly touching. I found myself telling him about my abandoned studies in literature, my childhood in Wisconsin, the small dreams I'd set aside when my father's illness had consumed our lives. Alessandro listened with genuine attention, asking thoughtful questions that suggested he was truly engaged. As the evening progressed, the formality between us gradually dissolved, replaced by something that felt almost like friendship. "You're an old soul," he observed as I described my love of classic novels. "That's rare in someone your age." "My father used to say the same thing," I replied, surprised by how easily I could speak of Dad without the usual stab of grief. He'd find me reading Austen under the covers with a flashlight and just shake his head. Alessandro smiled, a real smile this time, not the guarded version I'd seen before. The expression transformed his face, softening the sharp edges of his features and revealing the handsome young man beneath the intimidating exterior. "What?" I asked, self-conscious under his gaze. "You have his smile," he said softly. "When you truly mean it, it's his." The observation, so personal, so unexpected, brought a flush to my cheeks. "Thank you for telling me that," I whispered. "It's nice to think I carry something of him with me." A comfortable silence fell between us, the city lights twinkling below as we finished our dessert. As Paolo cleared the final dishes and discreetly withdrew, leaving a carafe of coffee on a side table, I realized with surprise that nearly 3 hours had passed. The evening had flown by in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "It's getting late," Alessandro said, noting my poorly concealed yawn. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be a full day." He escorted me to the private elevator, his hand hovering near the small of my back without quite touching me, a gesture both protective and respectful of boundaries. "Thank you for dinner," I said as the elevator doors opened. "And for telling me about my father." "Thank you for listening," he replied, his dark eyes studying my face as if committing it to memory. "Good night, Riley." Back in my new apartment, I kicked off my heels and sank onto the plush sofa, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. The connection between Alessandro and my father felt both comforting and concerning, a genuine debt of gratitude, but one that had drawn me into a world I still didn't fully understand. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Did he tell you how they really met? Ask him about the money." I stared at the cryptic message, a chill running down my spine. When I tried to reply, the message disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. Sleep eluded me that night, my dreams filled with icy roads and burning cars, and a younger version of Alessandro Vitale looking at me with eyes that held secrets yet to be revealed. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activity as I settled into my new role. Alessandro's business interests were indeed vast and legitimate. Real estate holdings, shipping companies, technology investments, and philanthropic foundations. My days were filled with scheduling meetings, coordinating with his executive team, and gradually learning the complex web of his business empire. Alessandro himself was often absent, disappearing for hours, or sometimes entire days on business I wasn't privy to. When present, he was unfailingly polite, but maintained a professional distance that contrasted sharply with a personal connection we'd shared during our dinner. It was after one such absence, nearly 2 weeks into my employment, that everything changed. I was working late in my office, organizing Alessandro's schedule for an upcoming trip to New York, when Marco appeared in my doorway, his usually impassive face tight with tension. "Miss Walker," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Mr. Vitale needs you. Now." The elevator ride to the garage level was silent, Marco radiating a coiled energy that set my nerves on edge. In the parking area, a different black car waited, larger than usual, with windows tinted so dark they appeared opaque. "What's happening?" I asked as Marco opened the rear door. "Mr. Vitale will explain," was all he said, gesturing for me to get in. Alessandro sat in the far corner of the back seat, shadows obscuring his face. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I gasped involuntarily. His white shirt was stained with what could only be blood, his right hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage. "Alessandro," I breathed, instinctively reaching for him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "It's not my blood," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Not mostly." The car pulled away from the curb, Marco driving with one hand, while the other rested near what I now recognized as a holstered gun beneath his jacket. "I need your help, Riley," Alessandro continued, his eyes finding mine in the darkness. "No questions. Can you do that for me?" I should have been frightened, should have demanded to be taken back to the tower, to the safe, legitimate world I'd been carefully kept within. Instead, I found myself nodding, a strange calm settling over me as I reached for his injured hand. "Tell me what you need." The car sped through the darkened streets of Chicago, taking turns with practiced precision that suggested Marco was deliberately avoiding main roads. Alessandro watched me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. "There's a first aid kit under the seat," he said, his voice controlled despite the obvious pain he was in. I retrieved the surprisingly comprehensive medical kit and gently unwrapped the blood-soaked handkerchief from his hand. The cut was deep across his palm, still seeping blood despite what appeared to be a hasty attempt to close it. "This needs stitches," I said, examining the wound in the dim light. "We should go to a hospital." "No hospitals," Alessandro replied firmly. "Not tonight." I looked up at him, questions burning on my tongue, but remembered my promise. No questions. Instead, I focused on cleaning the wound as best I could with the antiseptic wipes from the kit. "Have you done this before?" Alessandro asked as I worked, watching my hands with curiosity. "My dad coached Little League," I explained, carefully applying pressure to stop the bleeding. "I patched up a lot of scraped knees and split lips over the years." A small smile touched his lips. "He taught you well." I managed to close the wound with butterfly bandages, then wrapped his hand in clean gauze. As I secured the final piece of tape, Alessandro's fingers curled around mine, holding me in place. "Thank you." he said softly. Our eyes met in the shadowed back seat, and something electric passed between us, a current of understanding perhaps, or something deeper. The house is secure, sir, Marco announced, breaking the moment as he pulled the car through an ornate gate that opened automatically at our approach. We had arrived at what appeared to be a large estate on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling mansion set back from the road, surrounded by manicured grounds and a high perimeter wall. Security cameras tracked our movement up the winding driveway. Where are we? I asked, unable to contain my curiosity any longer. My family home, Alessandro replied, straightening his blood-stained cuff as the car came to a stop. Where I grew up. The front door opened before we reached it, revealing a silver-haired woman in a simple black dress, her face lined with age and worry. Her eyes widened at the sight of Alessandro's appearance, but she said nothing, simply stepping aside to let us enter. Grazie, Sofia, Alessandro said, kissing the woman's cheek with evident affection. È tutto pronto? She nodded, her eyes darting to me with undisguised curiosity. Sì, tutto pronto. E la ragazza? This is Riley Walker, Alessandro said in English, placing his uninjured hand lightly on the small of my back. She's with me. Something in the simple phrase carried weight beyond its literal meaning, causing Sofia to raise an eyebrow before giving me a slight nod of acknowledgement. The guest room is prepared, she said to me, her accent thick but her English clear. If you'll follow me, she stays with me, Alessandro interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Sofia's eyes widened fractionally, but she merely nodded again. As you wish. I'll bring fresh clothes. Alessandro led me through the mansion, a study in old-world opulence, with marble floors, antique furniture, and oil paintings of stern-faced men who shared Alessandro's strong features and penetrating gaze. Ancestral portraits, I realized, generations of Vitales. We entered what appeared to be a study, its walls lined with leather-bound books, and its center dominated by a massive desk of carved mahogany. Alessandro went straight to a cabinet in the corner, pouring himself a generous measure of amber liquid before turning to me. Drink? I shook my head. I think I need a clear head right now. He nodded, respecting my decision, and downed his own drink in a single swallow. You must have questions, he said, setting down the empty glass. You said no questions, I reminded him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. And you obeyed. Impressive restraint. I'm full of surprises. His expression softened, revealing that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. Yes, you are. Sofia returned with a stack of clothing, placing it on a side table before withdrawing silently. Alessandro picked up a simple black dress and offered it to me. It was my sister's, he explained. She's about your size. I accepted the garment, suddenly aware of the specks of blood that had transferred to my own clothes while tending to his hand. Where can I change? He pointed to a door on the far side of the study. Through there. The adjoining room was a luxurious bathroom, with marble fixtures and soft lighting that made even my haggard reflection look somewhat presentable. I changed quickly, the black dress fitting surprisingly well, if a bit loose around the waist. After washing Alessandro's blood from my hands, I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a waitress living paycheck to paycheck. Now I was standing in a Mafia boss's family mansion, wearing his sister's clothes after bandaging a wound that had clearly come from some kind of violent encounter. What was I doing here? What invisible line had I crossed? And could I ever step back across it? When I returned to the study, Alessandro had also changed into a fresh shirt and was sitting behind the desk, his bandaged hand resting on the polished surface. He looked up as I entered, his eyes traveling over me in the borrowed dress. Better? He asked. I nodded, hovering uncertainly near the door. Come, sit, he said, gesturing to a chair across from him. I owe you an explanation. I approached cautiously, settling into the leather chair that seemed to swallow me in its depth. I thought you said no questions. I'm revising the terms, he replied with a hint of wry humor. You've earned answers tonight. What happened, Alessandro? I asked softly, my concern genuine. Whose blood was that on your shirt? He studied me for a long moment, as if assessing whether I could handle the truth. There are people in this city who would challenge what my family has built. he said finally. People who don't understand the rules of respect, of territory. And one of these people attacked you? His expression darkened. They attacked a business under my protection. A restaurant in Little Italy. The owner has paid for my family's protection for 30 years, never missed a payment, never caused trouble. I thought of Bellissimo's and Mr. DeLuca's obvious deference to Alessandro. A protection arrangement then, the classic Mafia stereotype made real. They hurt this restaurant owner? I asked, trying to understand. They hurt his daughter, Alessandro corrected, his voice hardening to steel. 19 years old, home from college for the weekend. They wanted to send a message to me through my business associates. Horror washed through me. Is she? She'll recover, he said grimly. And those responsible have been dealt with. The implication hung heavy in the air between us. I should have been frightened, should have been running for the door. Instead, I found myself asking, "How did you cut your hand?" A flicker of surprise crossed his features, perhaps at the practical nature of my question rather than moral outrage. "Broken glass," he said after a moment. "Things got messy." I nodded, absorbing this information with a calmness that should have disturbed me. "Why bring me here? Why involve me at all?" Alessandro leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Because I needed to know." "Know what?" "If you would run," he said simply. "If you would see the reality of who I am, of what I do, and turn away." Understanding dawned. This was a test. He didn't deny it. "I've shown you only the legitimate side of my business until now. But that's not the complete picture of who I am, Riley. I needed to know if you could accept the whole truth." "And if I couldn't?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "If I ran?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I would have let you go, set you up somewhere far from Chicago, with enough money to start fresh. But I would have had to ensure your silence." A chill ran down my spine at the implicit threat, but strangely, I wasn't afraid. Perhaps I should have been. "Is that still an option?" I asked. "Walking away?" Pain flashed across his features, so brief I almost missed it. "If that's what you want, yes. Despite what you might think of me now, I'm not in the habit of forcing people to stay where they don't wish to be." I considered his words carefully, searching my heart for the answer. The sensible part of me screamed to take the offer, to run as far from Alessandro Vitale and his dangerous world as possible. But another part, a part I barely recognized, whispered that running would mean returning to the invisibility of my old life. Here, with him, I was seen. Valued. Protected. "Why did you really choose me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since that first night. It wasn't just about my father, was it? Alessandro's gaze was steady, unflinching. "From the moment I saw you in that restaurant. Your grace under humiliation, your quiet strength. I knew you were exceptional when I realized who you were, whose daughter." He paused, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since I'd known him. It felt like fate. "You don't strike me as a man who believes in fate," I observed. A small smile touched his lips. "Perhaps not. But I do believe in recognizing opportunity when it presents itself." "And what opportunity did I represent?" His expression grew serious again. "Someone uncorrupted by this world, someone who could see me, not just the power or the money or the fear I inspire, but me." He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "Do you know how rare that is, Riley? To be seen for who you truly are?" I did know. Since my father's death, I'd been invisible. Just another struggling waitress, anonymous in the city's vastness, until Alessandro had looked at me with those dark, seeing eyes. "I still don't fully understand what you want from me," I admitted. "Right now? Just your presence," he said, his honesty disarming. "Your perspective. Your trust, if you can give it." And in the future, a complexity of emotions crossed his face. Desire, hesitation, something that might have been tenderness. "That depends on you, on what you want." The air between us charged with unspoken possibilities. I should have been overwhelmed, confused by the rapid evolution of our relationship. Instead, I felt strangely clear-headed as if the events of the night had burned away pretense and left only truth behind. "I want to understand your world," I said finally. "All of it, not just the parts you think I can handle." Surprise registered in his eyes, followed by what looked like admiration. "It's a dangerous world, Riley. Once you step fully into it, there's no going back to the life you had before." "I know," I said softly. "But I think that life ended the moment you walked into Bellissimo's." Alessandro rose from his chair and circled the desk slowly, coming to stand before me. With gentle fingers, he tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. "There would be rules," he said, his voice low and serious. "For your protection, for both our sakes." I nodded, my heart racing at his proximity. "You would need to trust me, even when you don't understand my decisions." "I could try," I whispered. Something softened in his eyes. "That's all I can ask." Slowly, telegraphing his intentions to give me time to pull away, he lowered his face to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, not demanding. When I responded, lifting my hands to his chest, it deepened, becoming something hungry and possessive that made my knees weak with sudden desire. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Alessandro rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the first moment I saw you," he confessed, his voice rough. "Even when I was covered in whiskey?" I teased, trying to lighten the intensity of the moment. He laughed softly, the sound rumbling through his chest beneath my palms. "Especially then. You looked like an avenging angel, all wounded dignity and quiet strength." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Alessandro straightened, his expression quickly composing itself into its usual mask of control. "Enter," he called, though he didn't step away from me. Marco appeared in the doorway, his face professionally blank despite the scene he had clearly interrupted. "Sir, your father is on the line. He says it's urgent." Alessandro nodded once. "I'll take it in here. That will be all for tonight, Marco." After Marco withdrew, Alessandro turned back to me with a regretful expression. "Duty calls," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected tenderness. "We'll continue this conversation tomorrow." "I'll hold you to that," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. His eyes darkened with something that made my pulse quicken. "I'm counting on it." As I prepared to leave the study, Alessandro caught my hand, pulling me back for one more brief, fierce kiss. "Stay in the house tonight," he murmured against my lips, "for safety." I nodded, understanding that the night's events had likely made me a potential target as well. "Where?" "Sophia will show you to a room," he said, releasing me reluctantly. "Rest. Tomorrow begins a new chapter for us both." That night, lying in a guest room more luxurious than any hotel I'd ever seen, I reflected on the irrevocable choice I seemed to have made. By staying, by accepting Alessandro's world and his kiss, I had stepped onto a path very different from the one I'd imagined for myself. Yet strangely, it didn't feel wrong. Perhaps this had been inevitable from the moment Alessandro Vitale had seen me, truly seen me, across that restaurant floor. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of Alessandro's penthouse, our penthouse now, watching the summer sunset paint the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Strong arms encircled my waist from behind, and I leaned back against Alessandro's solid warmth. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured, pressing his lips to the curve of my neck. "I was thinking about the night we met," I admitted, turning in his embrace to face him, "when those men threw their drinks on me." A shadow crossed his face at the memory. "They regretted that decision deeply, I assure you." I raised an eyebrow. "You never did tell me what happened to them." "Let's just say they learned the importance of respecting service workers," he replied with a dangerous smile that still made my heart skip, "and the consequences of disrespecting a Vitale." The surname still gave me pause sometimes, not because I regretted taking it 3 months ago in a small, private ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan, but because of the weight it carried in this city. Riley Vitale, wife of Chicago's most powerful man, a position that came with both privilege and peril. "Any regrets?" Alessandro asked, reading my expression with the uncanny perception that had drawn me to him from the beginning. I considered the question honestly. The past months had been a crash course in Alessandro's world, the legitimate businesses, and the shadowy operations that sustained them. I had watched him shift seamlessly between devoted lover and ruthless enforcer, had seen both his capacity for tenderness and his unflinching brutality toward those who crossed him. I had also seen his loyalty to family, his unexpected generosity toward those under his protection, his unwavering commitment to the codes that governed his life. He was a complex man, neither the monster outsiders might paint him to be, nor the sanitized businessman he presented to the legitimate world. "No regrets," I said finally, meaning it, "though I still wish you told me sooner about my father, about how he really saved you." Alessandro's expression softened. "I wasn't sure you were ready to hear that your father had been working as an accountant for my family when he found those discrepancies, that he'd risked everything to warn my father about the embezzlement that would have led to federal investigation. He always did have an overdeveloped sense of honor," I said, with a sad smile, thinking of the man who'd raised me, the high school teacher who had apparently moonlighted as a mob accountant to make ends meet after my mother died, a secret life I never suspected. "As does his daughter," Alessandro observed, lifting my hand to press a kiss to the platinum wedding band on my finger, though perhaps with a more flexible interpretation of what's honorable. I laughed softly. "I think Dad would understand. He always said the truest morality comes from loyalty to those you love, not from abstract rules. A wise man," Alessandro agreed. "I wish I could have known him better. He would have liked you," I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt once he got past the whole Mafia boss thing. Alessandro chuckled, the sound warming me from within. "Your father saved my life twice, you know. Once on that icy road, and again with that warning about the books. In doing so, he gave me the greatest gift of all." His dark eyes held mine with intensity. "He gave me you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city into twilight, I stood in my husband's embrace and reflected on the strange path that had led me here. From invisible waitress to the wife of Chicago's most feared and respected man, from a life of quiet desperation to one of dangerous passion. They had thrown whiskey on a waitress to mock her, not knowing she was destined to become a Mafia boss's wife. Their cruelty had been the catalyst for a transformation none of them could have imagined, least of all me. Alessandro's lips found mine in the gathering darkness, his kiss still holding the power to make me forget everything but the heat between us. "Come inside," he murmured against my mouth. "The night is just beginning." As I followed him into our home, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought Alessandro Vitali into Bellissimo's that night, and whatever courage had allowed me to accept the dangerous, exhilarating life he offered. Some choices appear to trap you, only to reveal themselves as the key to a freedom you never knew existed. In choosing Alessandro, in choosing this life, I had finally found where I belonged. Not as a possession or a trophy, but as an equal partner to a man who saw me for exactly who I was and wanted me anyway. In the end, perhaps that was the greatest power of all.